At negotiations, he was invisible. In a crowd, transparent. But where billions crumbled, offshore accounts vanished, and corporations fell apart, it was his finger pressing the key. No shouting, no bullets, just numbers, just logic. He was feared more than arrests. His name passed in whispers. He detected lies by the micro-movement of a pupil, by the silence between words. But the most dangerous failure didn't begin in the system. It began with the woman he lived with. A phone no longer left on the table, a hand that trembled under his touch, and a smile that had turned into an apology. He didn't make a scene. He activated surveillance. One dinner, one camera, one wordless confession. After that, everything went according to plan. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. To the rare few who were aware he even existed, Liam Barrett wasn't merely a man. He was myth come to life. In the shadowy corridors of international finance, where the powerful and corrupt mingled, mob bosses in bespoke suits, politicians on the take, and masterminds of white-collar crime, his name echoed like a cautionary tale. Always spoken in low voices, always with an edge of unease. Yet despite the rumors, no one could place a face to the name. His appearance, history, and location were all cloaked in mystery. To the wider world, he remained intangible. An urban legend passed around through scrambled communications and behind layers of security. They called him the Shadow Code, a name that carried the weight of fear in the highest offices of intelligence across the globe. To those agencies, that name was more devastating than a drone strike. While governments waged visible wars, the Shadow Code dismantled empires in silence, wielding data like a scalpel. Corrupt regimes and criminal enterprises collapsed under his unseen hand. Hidden accounts evaporated. Complex laundering operations fell apart overnight, and billion-dollar fortunes disappeared without a trace. He never needed a weapon. His power lay in logic, not violence. As the world's wealthiest criminals buried their assets under dummy names and encrypted pathways, he followed every lead, reading digital fingerprints others couldn't even see. A single stray character in a ledger. An unusual transaction in a sea of data. One fragment of overlooked metadata. That's all he needed. And then everything would begin to unravel. What terrified his enemies most was that he never surfaced, never left a clue, never showed a face. Even the intelligence networks hunting him had only guesses. Just a handful of operatives knew the truth behind the myth. Inside government circles, the Shadow Code was assumed to be a black budget project, maybe some AI tool or covert surveillance system. No one imagined a human being was orchestrating it all. No one dreamed that behind the myth was a man hiding in plain sight. That Liam Barrett, mild-mannered financial advisor, was the architect of global chaos. He was the kind of man you'd pass on the street and forget instantly. And that forgettability was by design. Disappearing into the background required sacrifice. For over a decade, he had been with Mara, the woman who owned his heart, but he'd never allowed their love to become official. Not because his feelings weren't real, but because every legal connection, every traceable commitment, could bring down the entire life he'd so carefully kept hidden. He built his existence on silence and invisibility. To neighbors, they were the picture of a quiet couple, pleasant, unremarkable, fond of routine, occasionally slipping away on short trips. But whenever Liam claimed to be tied up in meetings or attending financial summits abroad, the truth was far more dangerous. He was often thousands of miles away, locked in rooms from Singapore to Sao Paulo, dismantling criminal empires others didn't even know existed. Each time he struck, the ground trembled beneath the elite. None of them ever uncovered his identity, his tactics, or a way to stop him. Still, for all his calculated caution, Liam never imagined that the worst betrayal wouldn't come from a cartel boss or intelligence mole, but from the only place he thought was safe: his home. For all his brilliance at uncovering deception, he never considered he'd have to turn those skills inward, toward the one person he trusted without hesitation. For more than 10 years, he allowed himself to believe that Mara was his escape. With her, he could live a lie that felt like the truth. He could pretend to be an ordinary man, detached from the shadows he ruled. But irony is ruthless. The man who had stripped away countless secrets had hidden the greatest one from the woman he loved most. She remained unaware. Mara had no inkling that the gentle, steady man beside her was the invisible nightmare whispered about in the highest levels of power. Liam had mastered the art of seeming normal. Every lie was seamless. Every absence had a plausible explanation. His travels were dressed up in corporate jargon and investor meetings. She never doubted him. Why would she? He was attentive, kind, always there when it counted. He helped shape a life filled with meaning and memories. And all the while, he kept his other life buried beneath the surface. But change crept in, gradual and subtle. At first, it was nothing specific, just small, disjointed moments. Mara would smile at the wrong time, lose her focus mid-sentence, offer a hug that felt distant. And Liam, who had spent a lifetime analyzing falsehoods, knew the body was incapable of lying completely. Words could be tailored, stories rehearsed. But the body always betrayed the truth it couldn't speak. Her passion had grown fiercer in their recent encounters, almost desperate, as if she were trying to atone for something she couldn't bring herself to admit. She was more affectionate, more focused, almost hyper-aware of him. Yet behind the warmth lay a quiet disconnection. Her body stayed near, but her thoughts were somewhere far away. And they weren't lost in confusion or emotion. They were anchored to someone else. Someone unseen had entered their world. Liam didn't know who he was yet, but he could feel the intrusion like a presence in the room. The change became unmistakable when he noticed subtle shifts in how she treated her phone. She used to leave it anywhere, on the table, the sofa, even the bookshelf. Now, it was always with her, always silent, always turned face down. The screen, once frequently alight with messages, now stayed dark. And though she tried to act as though nothing had changed, Liam could see the flicker of unease every time he came near while she was texting. A man who had spent years peeling back layers of deceit, tracing hidden fortunes, and dismantling criminal empires knew the signs all too well. This wasn't chance. This wasn't insecurity. The trail didn't lead to offshore accounts or forged signatures. It led to his living room, to the woman he thought he knew. He tried to dismiss it, to tell himself he was projecting, letting his professional instincts spill into his private life. Maybe she was just going through something. Maybe it wasn't what he feared. But a man who had built a career on recognizing lies knew how they behaved, how they slipped into silence, how they lived in small moments, how they suffocated trust without making a sound. Still, he clung to the hope that he was wrong, that this was something else, something explainable. Yet deep down, a voice refused to be ignored, the voice that had never misread a trail, never overlooked a clue, never failed to see the pattern. The more he tried to silence it, the louder it grew. And finally, he gave in. He launched a plan he'd never imagined using inside his own home. He pretended to leave town, told Mara about a sudden consulting gig in another city. He kissed her goodbye, held her a little too tightly, and promised to be back in a couple of days. Then he checked into a hotel just a few miles away, opened his laptop, and activated the tools he reserved for his most sensitive operations. Step 1. Enable tracking on her phone, a task he completed in under 5 minutes. Then came the call logs. He combed through months of history. That's when he saw it, his first concrete lead. A number that appeared repeatedly. Odd hours. Sometimes late at night, sometimes mid-morning. no name attached. To Liam, an unsaved contact was a warning flare in the dark. He began to dig. He ran identity traces, searched databases, reviewed military records, social media activity, travel patterns. Piece by piece, a name emerged: Caleb Emerson. Liam didn't know him personally, but professionally, the name set off instant alarms. He launched a full-scale investigation. The data formed a picture. Caleb had once served in the Marines. A stranger to Liam, but not to Mara. Hidden in the background noise were hints of a history. Photos, tagged locations, buried social traces. A past connection. One she had never spoken of. A story erased until it resurfaced now. Liam's chest tightened. A rare, unfamiliar ache spread through him. Not rage, not fear. Something more devastating. A hollow mix of sorrow and disbelief. And unlike the threats he was used to, dangerous men, high-stakes crimes, this one came from inside the place he thought safest. In his line of work, Liam had long ago stopped believing in coincidences. If Caleb had returned and Mara was speaking to him again, it wasn't by chance. It was deliberate. Something hidden was unfolding. He had to uncover it. He couldn't turn away. What he didn't yet realize was just how deep it would go, how the truth waiting ahead would dwarf every danger he had ever faced. Alone in his hotel room, the screen casting a glow across his face, Liam did what he did best: investigate. With the meticulousness of a surgeon, he dissected Caleb's digital footprint: transactions, travel logs, background data. But the deeper he went, the more disturbing the findings became. Caleb was clean. No red flags, no aliases, no criminal ties. A disciplined life, nothing suspicious. And that was what cut the deepest. Liam, a master at uncovering motives and secrets, was powerless here. Because no database, no algorithm, no investigative method could trace the path of the human heart. Not even his own. Then, as he prepared another scan, a new alert flashed across the screen. A fresh message had arrived. For Caleb. He saw the message the instant it lit up his screen. So did Liam. The words hit hard, abrupt, and unforgiving. "My husband's out of town again. Let's meet tonight at 7 Bella Luna." His hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. After a beat, he steadied himself, took note of the time and place, and began to formulate a plan. He arrived well before the hour, far earlier than necessary. He picked a spot where he'd stay unnoticed, but could see everything. His equipment came online, lenses aligned, audio adjusted, settings triple-checked. Then, the waiting began. Minutes dragged by like hours, until a familiar vehicle slid into the lot. Mara stepped out, smoothing her dress, adjusting a loose strand of hair, checking her reflection in the window's sheen. There was an anticipation in her movements. Caleb waited at the entrance. Their greeting wasn't rushed. It lingered, unmistakably intimate. They laughed like people who shared more than just conversation. They stood close, hands brushing, eyes locked in mutual understanding. No hesitation, no shame. They acted as if these meetings were customary, not clandestine. Soon they disappeared inside, ordered drinks, touched glasses. Their connection was seamless. Gentle gestures, murmured exchanges, smiles meant only for each other. She twirled her hair with practiced charm. He eased her chair back like an old habit. It felt less like a date than a reunion, long overdue and deeply personal. Their voices remained low, their movements synchronized, lost in a world of two. Liam watched in silence, expression unreadable, though his heartbeat thundered. Every gesture, every glance, recorded. This was all he needed. He shut down the system, packed the gear, and walked, calmly, deliberately, straight to their table. Mara's laugh died in her throat the moment she saw him. Caleb tensed. Her face crumpled into disbelief, drained of color. Even Caleb's cool cracked. Liam stared at them both, his voice flat and cold. "Enjoy it while you can. This was your last chance. He turned and walked away, never slowing, never looking back. He drove home in silence, not a single detour. Once inside, he shifted into autopilot. Everything had been rehearsed in his mind 100 times. He gathered the necessary tools, disconnected from all networks, encrypted and secured essential files, wiped systems clean, each move executed with cold efficiency. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Mara sat motionless, still trying to process the blow. When it finally landed, she reached for her phone, dialing his number. No ring. The call dropped instantly. She tried again. Same result. No connection. As if the number had never existed. While she scrambled, Liam was already sealing the last steps. Accounts closed, assets relocated, histories purged. He was deleting himself. Stocks, savings, crypto wallets, even software identities vanished. He took everything, every cent. And it was effortless. There had never been a marriage license, no binding documents, no legal ties to unravel. The house, rented, solely in his name. The car, registered to him. Every access point to their shared finances, controlled exclusively by him. She had never questioned it. Now she'd learn what that cost. While she frantically tried to call, Liam was long gone. Off the grid, out of the city, out of reach. He disappeared with the kind of precision that only comes from experience. The man who built identities out of code had become an enigma in the flesh. Days passed. Then the weight of it began to settle, slow and crushing. Her credit card stopped working. Bank accounts? Empty. Every login attempt was denied. Every app froze her out. Online banking? Account not recognized? She searched everywhere for proof of ownership, for a paper trail. There was none. By the fourth day, the final blow landed. A call from the property manager. The voice was dry, businesslike. The lease had ended. It would not be renewed. She had 5 days to vacate. She made her appeal, requested an extension, explained that her husband had always taken care of these matters, insisted it had to be some kind of mistake. But the reply was unyielding, final. The agreement was null. The contract, invalid. The house, no longer hers. Heart racing, she grabbed her phone, scrolled feverishly through her contacts, and tapped on Caleb's name. As soon as he answered, her mask cracked. Through trembling cries, she poured it all out. Liam had disappeared, wiped out their finances, left her destitute. Eviction was no longer a threat. It was inevitable. On the line, Caleb's response came without hesitation, cold and unembellished. Mara, I live in a shoebox. I don't have space for you. The sentence hit her like a physical blow. In that moment, she saw him clearly, exactly as he'd always been. A man allergic to roots, unwilling to attach himself to anything lasting, perpetually keeping tomorrow at a safe distance. He had always lived untouched by obligation, committed only when it suited him. And now, when she had nothing left, that truth surfaced with cruel precision. With nowhere else to turn, she packed what little she could manage, stuffed the remnants of her life into a few overburdened bags, and made her way back to her mother's. The homecoming stung, coated in shame, rage, grief, and the crushing realization that this was never the future she had imagined. And Liam? He vanished completely. Not a message, not a trace. The man who once deconstructed syndicates, unearthed hidden fortunes, and dismantled networks from the inside with surgical expertise, simply did what he was always best at. He vanished. Maybe he's perched now in some nameless cafe overseas, eyes quietly tracking his next target, plotting the downfall of another corrupt empire. Or perhaps he disappeared so thoroughly that no one, not allies, not enemies, not even the woman who believed she held his heart, will ever find him again. Because when someone who lives like a ghost chooses to disappear, not even love can call him home. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.